Her trousers were soaked in blood. And still, Charlotte whispered sorry to the guard, to the staff, to no one in particular, as if she had caused it. And when Camilla found her, she didn't kneel. She scolded her, blamed her, humiliated her in front of the others, until the guard couldn't look away, until Catherine walked in and saw her daughter standing in silence, shoulders shaking in a fresh change of clothes, tears clinging to her lashes, apologizing for ruining the event. Catherine didn't ask who was at fault. She didn't speak at all. She just knelt and broke down. So before we show you what the doctor discovered and what the Queen said that shattered Catherine, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from, hit subscribe and tap the bell icon. Because today's story isn't about injury. It's about a child's first shame and the guard who refused to let her carry it alone. The gravel crunch of tyres outside Windsor's side courtyard marked the return of the royal children from their afternoon school engagement, a minor public event, mostly smiles and handshakes, meant to gently ease Charlotte into more visible roles. The black estate car pulled into position by the private entrance. Sergeant Rowan Pierce, stationed at the family's internal corridor post, registered the arrival through the polished windows just beyond the main archway. He didn't move. That wasn't his role, not unless protocol was breached, but he watched. First out, Prince George and Prince Louis, bounding down the car steps with the impatient energy of schoolboys released from duty. George shrugged his satchel higher, was already retelling something with big hand gestures. Louis was still mid-laugh, one shoe untied. Then Charlotte, slower, quieter. She stepped down carefully, and not gingerly, but with an intentional slowness that immediately caught Pierce's attention. One foot, then the other. Her posture was upright, her uniform neat, blazer buttoned, tie crisp. But something in her movement didn't sit right. She held the blazer balled behind her lower back, not folded over her arm, and she avoided the quick skip step she usually did to catch up with her brothers. Pierce's eyes tracked her silently as she crossed the threshold. "Library first, then snack," the nanny said brightly, ushering them toward the inner hallway. "And after that you're free until supper." George nodded. Louis groaned. Charlotte just offered a small nod, not a word spoken. That wasn't like her. She usually asked questions about everything, the guards' shoes, their shift hours, whether their rifles were heavy or just looked heavy. Pierce noted the change, but kept still. Professional, present, but unseen. They passed him in the corridor. George and Louis led the charge toward the playroom. Charlotte lingered behind by a full 6 paces. She didn't stop, but she didn't look at anyone either. The nanny paused near the corner. "Charlotte, snacks this way, darling." "I'm not hungry," Charlotte murmured. She didn't wait for permission, just walked, blazer still clutched behind her back, straight toward her private suite. The nanny frowned, but let her go. "Maybe just tired," she muttered to no one in particular, before returning to the boys. Pierce remained at attention, but inside, something itched. He'd been stationed at Windsor long enough to know the rhythms, the normal beats of the palace's younger generation. Charlotte had a rhythm. Today, she was offbeat. Another 30 minutes passed. The corridor quieted. Afternoon staff moved through with lowered voices, collecting dishes, adjusting drapes for evening. Pierce remained still. His station was at the cross corridor, a discreet but central post between the children's wing and the Queen's study hallway. It wasn't ceremonial, it was observational. He caught it then. A faint streak, low on the carpet near the edge of the wall. Crimson but dull, too dark for jam, too smeared for paint. Pierce's eyes narrowed. He shifted one step forward, still silent. Another mark trailed toward the alcove corner, barely visible, but there. He moved now. No rush, just measured. Tracking the pattern. A few more paces down, behind the bench near the side table where deliveries were occasionally left, he spotted it. Charlotte's blazer, crumpled. Half tucked behind the bench, the navy fabric turned inside out. He crouched slightly, and just enough to check the interior. The lining was stained, not blotched, soaked, dark red, dense around the lower hem. Still damp. He stood, quickly now, pressed the mic on his collar. Pierce, internal residential, discreet medical standby requested, no alarm. Copy that, Sergeant. En route. He turned toward the children's hallway. Something was off, deeply off. Charlotte's door was slightly ajar. He approached, knocked once soft, no answer. Princess Charlotte! Still no reply. He pushed the door open gently. The bathroom light was on. He stepped just to the edge of the tiled floor. Charlotte was sitting on the closed lid of the toilet. Her school trousers were still on, but stained, deep red down the back. She didn't look up. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, gripping her thumbs. Tears had already dried on her cheeks. Pierce didn't speak at first. She beat him to it. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't tell Mummy. I didn't mean to ruin everything." The late afternoon corridor had settled into its quiet rhythm. Floor staff moving softly in slippers, distant clatter of kitchen trays being returned to service lifts, and the gentle hush that always seemed to settle over Windsor's private quarters once school hours ended. Sergeant Rowan Pierce remained posted near the corner junction, eyes trained not on anyone in particular, but on the space itself. The way light moved across the marble floor, the way silence shifted when someone was near. He trusted the corridor to speak first. That's what made the mark stand out. It wasn't obvious, not unless you were looking for it. A faint streak along the edge of the hallway runner, low to the ground near the wall. The kind of place a child's shoe or hemline might brush. Pierce stepped off his line. No sound, no hurry. He crouched just slightly, narrowing his gaze. Red, faint, but unmistakable. Smudged in a way that suggested it hadn't dried yet. Not bright, not like paint. Darker, natural. His eyes followed the faint trail. It wasn't continuous, more like a scatter. A broken trail moving down the east corridor. It led to the alcove Charlotte had walked past earlier, and behind a low-set delivery bench, he saw the fabric, Charlotte's school blazer. He didn't touch it at first, just observed. The navy was turned halfway inside out, shoved behind the leg of the bench, half tucked beneath a folded palace linen used for afternoon trays. Now he crouched fully. 2 fingers, gloved, gently lifted the corner of the fabric. The lining inside wasn't just stained, it was soaked. The blood was not splattered. It had pooled and absorbed, low, near the waist hem, faintly damp to the touch. Pierce didn't hesitate. He pressed the comm on his collar. Pierce, North Interior East, discreet medical standby requested. No sirens, no escorts, 1 medic. Understood. En route. He stood, still calm, but now alert, fully engaged. The direction of the trail was clear now, and so was the destination. The children's private bathroom corridor. He moved faster, but without noise. Every step measured. Boots muffled by runner. He turned the final corner and saw it. Charlotte's door was ajar, not wide, but not closed either. He knocked once, gently, knuckles against polished oak. "Princess Charlotte." Silence. "Ma'am?" Still nothing. He waited 2 more seconds, then stepped in. The lights inside were on. Charlotte's school bag was at the foot of her daybed, shoes neatly placed near the wall, but she wasn't in the room. Bathroom light glowed across the marble tiles just beyond. He didn't enter, not fully. Guards did not cross thresholds unless protocol demanded it, but he stepped close enough to see her. She was sitting on the closed toilet lid, knees tucked slightly inward, blazer gone, her school trousers still on. Except now, Pierce could see the back of them, soaked. From mid-thigh to knee, the fabric was dark, saturated. Blood had crept along the inner seams and into the lining. Charlotte's hands were folded tight in her lap, trembling slightly. Her lips were parted, but she didn't look up. Her chin was tucked low, hair falling forward. It was her voice that reached him first, soft, like breath rather than speech. "Please don't tell Mummy." Pierce said nothing. He didn't move. Charlotte blinked hard, her voice cracking this time. "I didn't mean to ruin everything." Her eyes were damp, not from fresh crying, but from something older, stuck. Pierce kept his voice low, even familiar. "You're not in trouble, Ma'am." She still didn't look at him. "I thought it would stop," she whispered. "I thought it would just..." go away. Have you been hurt? No, she shook her head. It started at school. But I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe I sat on something, but then... She gripped her hands tighter. I didn't want to say. I didn't want to make a fuss. Pierce crouched just outside the door frame, still not entering, just steadying. You didn't do anything wrong. Charlotte finally looked up. The fear in her eyes was older than 9 years. I thought if I told someone, they'd think I was disgusting. She swallowed. They laughed about it at school. The girls said it was gross, that boys don't like it, that you smell like pennies. Pierce didn't flinch. The nurse is on her way, he said gently. Just one. Quiet. No one else will come unless you want them to. Charlotte nodded slowly, then looked away again. Pierce waited. And on the far end of the corridor, the soft rubber hush of medical souls approached. Quiet, discreet, protocol perfect, because something had happened. And it wasn't just blood, it was what the blood had made her believe. The nurse moved gently, her presence more felt than heard. Soft hands, clipped words, no sudden movements. She was well trained for moments like this. Not trauma, but fear. Not blood loss, but dignity loss. Charlotte sat quietly now on the cushioned bench just outside her bathroom, fresh trousers in place, her stained ones carefully sealed in a discreet garment bag. No fuss, no labels. The bag would be documented quietly. No staff would talk. That was understood. Guard Pierce remained nearby, just a respectful few steps down the corridor. He didn't hover. He anchored. The nurse rose from her crouch and gently brushed Charlotte's hair back from her face. No more pain now, ma'am. Charlotte shook her head. Not really. It just feels sore. Inside. That's normal, the nurse replied softly. But we'll give you a warm pack just in case. Pierce watched Charlotte's shoulders relax, only slightly, enough to know the immediate fear was passing. Still, she didn't speak again until the nurse had left the room and the hallway had resumed its usual hush. Pierce turned, slowly approaching, not imposing but present. You don't have to talk, he said, but I'll stay if that helps. Charlotte hesitated, then she nodded once. After a long silence, she whispered, I thought I was sick. He didn't answer, just listened. Like something was wrong inside. It felt hot. Then it felt wet. But it wasn't like falling down and scraping your knee. It didn't stop. It just kept going. She folded her hands tightly. I went to the toilet in school. I saw it. I tried to clean it up, but it stained my underwear. So I tied my blazer around my waist. I kept sitting sideways so it wouldn't show. I didn't want to walk around too much. She looked up at him, eyes wide. I thought maybe I broke something. You didn't, Pierce said calmly. I didn't know it could happen like that. You're not the first, he said gently. And you're not broken. Charlotte nodded faintly, her voice starting to crack. I heard the older girls say it happens when your body's weird. Like, if it doesn't like being a kid anymore. They said it's gross. That boys can smell it. That if you bleed at school, everyone finds out. Pierce kept his face neutral, voice level. Is that why you didn't tell anyone? Charlotte swallowed hard. I didn't want anyone to think I was disgusting. A long pause, and I didn't want to disappoint Mummy. The words hit heavier than expected. Pierce finally knelt again, not inside her personal space, just close enough that she wouldn't feel alone. You haven't disappointed anyone. She stared down at the tips of her shoes. I tried to fix it. I wrapped tissues. I put paper in my underwear. But it didn't stop. And then it soaked through, so I took off the blazer and hid it. But I didn't know where else to go. I didn't want to walk into the main hall like that. She blinked again. I thought if I got to the bathroom here fast enough, I could clean it. Then change. Then no one would know. Pierce didn't speak for a moment. Then, you did everything you could, and none of it was wrong. But I still ruined things. You didn't ruin anything. She looked up at him sharply. Then why did it feel like I had to hide it? He didn't answer, because in that moment he knew no answer would undo the hours she'd spent believing she had to. Charlotte wiped her eyes with the heel of her palm. Is this going to happen again? Probably, he said honestly, but next time you'll know what it is, and you won't be alone. Charlotte nodded. A longer pause, then a smaller question. Will Mummy be mad? Pierce took a breath, not out of hesitation, but out of care. No. But Charlotte didn't look convinced. He added, "She won't be mad because nothing you did needs punishment, and everything you did was brave." Still, Charlotte's eyes flicked away. "I just didn't want her to think I'm messy." Pierce finally stood, his voice quiet now. Not commanding, not comforting, but simply true. "You are not messy. You are growing up." Charlotte looked up again, and this time there was no fear in her eyes, and only uncertainty. A different kind of weight, one even more delicate than pain, the kind that came not from blood, but from shame. And shame, Pierce knew, was the most dangerous thing a child could be taught to carry in silence. Dr. Elspeth Hawthorne had seen her fair share of royals at their most vulnerable. Sprained ankles on hunting grounds, fainting spells at parades, even a fractured wrist when one of the boys had tried to vault a stone balustrade during a rainstorm. But nothing quite hollowed the tone of the room like a child's silence after fear had taken root. Charlotte sat quietly on the padded bench inside the Queen's Children's Wing infirmary. Not the grand hospital wing, but the softer, in more private treatment space, nestled discreetly behind the royal nursery. Her hair had been brushed again, her face clean, but her knuckles remained white around the blanket bunched in her lap. Guard Pierce stood just outside the closed double doors. Dr. Hawthorne had nodded her permission for him to remain near. She understood. Some security wasn't just about body and limb. It was about letting a child know there was still someone outside the door who wouldn't look away. The doctor's voice was low, steady, clear of judgment. "Early menarche," she confirmed to the nurse after the brief examination. "No injuries, no signs of trauma or abnormality." The nurse didn't speak, just nodded and continued documenting. Dr. Hawthorne turned her attention back to Charlotte. She knelt, was keeping her white coat folded neatly back so as not to seem too formal. "Do you know what your body's doing, sweetheart?" Charlotte nodded, just barely. "You're not hurt. You're growing. It happened earlier than most girls, but still perfectly normal. A little inconvenient, sure, but nothing bad." Charlotte's voice was small. "I didn't know it was going to happen today." "No one ever does," Hawthorne said gently. "But you did the right thing. You came home. You found someone safe." Charlotte didn't respond to that. Her eyes dropped. Dr. Hawthorne pressed gently. "Did you tell anyone at school?" A tiny shake of the head. "You didn't feel safe?" A pause. Then, "I didn't want them to look at me like I was gross." Dr. Hawthorne nodded slowly. She didn't challenge it, not yet, not when Charlotte still sat there folded into herself, afraid of what she'd been taught to feel. "Did anyone at school notice?" "I don't think so. Maybe." One girl stared a bit. The nurse re-entered with a warm pack and discreet supplies, pre-labelled kits that the palace kept stocked for these rare but inevitable moments. Charlotte didn't reach for them, not yet. "I didn't even know what to ask for," she murmured. "I thought maybe it was something I did wrong. I kept thinking I should have said no when they asked me to read that poem. I kept thinking maybe if I stayed quiet it wouldn't get worse." Dr. Hawthorne gently laid the heat pack across her lap. "And that's the part I want you to forget." Charlotte glanced at her. "You didn't do anything wrong. Not by reading. Not by standing. Not by walking across that stage. Not by bleeding. Not by hiding it. Not even by being scared." Another long pause. Then Charlotte whispered, "But I still made everyone worry." "You made them notice," Hawthorne corrected. "That's not the same as worrying." She stood slowly, letting her hand rest lightly on Charlotte's shoulder. "Now, listen to me carefully. No one is going to make you feel ashamed for what your body does naturally. Not your school, not your staff, not even this palace." Outside, Guard Pierce still stood motionless, eyes on the corridor, but his ears tracking tone and cadence. Another physician arrived, bearing the incident summary, one of the internal safeguarding liaisons required to log any health events for minors within the palace's security ring. Hawthorne glanced at the paperwork, read it once, frowned. It stated, "Observed behavioural distress. Signs overlooked by staff during transport. Guardian informed upon discovery by Royal Guard." She turned back toward the nurse. "So she went through the entire drive home?" "Yes." "In silence?" No one noticed? No one looked closely enough. A silence fell between them, not of blame, but quiet realization. The palace had missed her. The staff had missed her. Even the systems meant to catch these moments had missed her. Pierce was the only one who hadn't. Dr. Hawthorne added one more line to the medical report before handing it to the liaison officer. If not for Guard Pierce's observation, incident would have remained undiscovered. Recommend review of transport protocols and safeguarding awareness training. The liaison nodded silently and tucked the file into a leather folio. Inside the room, Charlotte now held the warm pack gently against her abdomen. Her breathing had slowed. The trembling was gone. But the shame lingered, invisible, coiled just behind her spine. Hawthorne knew it would not be blood that stained this moment. It would be the silence that preceded it, and the adults who hadn't listened closely enough. The quiet that followed Charlotte's examination didn't last. 15 minutes later, the sound of authoritative heels striking the marble corridor echoed just beyond the infirmary suite. Guard Pierce, still stationed outside the door, stiffened instinctively. He didn't need to turn to know who was coming. He recognized the gait. Regal. Determined. A beat too sharp for the children's wing. Queen Camilla. She didn't pause when she arrived. Didn't ask. Didn't glance at the guard. She simply swept through the doors, trailing a mild floral perfume that tried too hard to mask tension. Dr. Hawthorne looked up in surprise. "Your Majesty," Camilla raised a hand. "I've been briefed." Charlotte had just finished dressing in fresh, oversized palace trousers from the emergency stock kept in a nearby drawer. She sat on the bench again, hair slightly damp from where a nurse had gently wiped her cheeks. When she saw Camilla enter, she visibly froze. Camilla took in the room quickly, her gaze landing not on the child's face but on the bundled clothing discarded on a tray. "So it's true," she said curtly. No one replied. Charlotte instinctively reached for the blanket again. Camilla walked forward slowly. Her voice was sharp, though not loud. "I warned about this. Coddling children into softness only invites these kinds of incidents." Dr. Hawthorne stepped forward. "Your Majesty," Camilla cut her off. "She's a future heir's sister. She just came back from public duties. You let her return looking like that." Charlotte flushed crimson. She looked down, ashamed, though no one had said she should be. Camilla continued, voice now tinged with scorn. "Do you know what the press would have done with this? If even one school photographer caught the back of her uniform today." "She's not a headline," the nurse murmured. "She's a little girl." But Camilla was already pivoting. "You should have composed yourself, Charlotte, quietly, with dignity. We all go through these moments, but we do not make scenes." Charlotte began stammering. I didn't mean—" Camilla didn't soften. "You're not a common child. You don't have the luxury of being unsure in public." Charlotte's lip trembled. The nurse subtly moved between them, but Camilla's words kept cutting through. "You should have asked for help discreetly, not run off crying. Do you have any idea how this reflects on the family?" The room fell into stillness. Charlotte whispered, "I didn't want to ruin anything." "You did," Camilla snapped. "That uniform will need burning, and the staff had to rearrange 3 schedules. That is not how we carry ourselves in this family." Charlotte began to cry again, quieter this time, as though trying to do even that with less noise. She looked to the floor, then to the tray, where her ruined trousers sat bundled in silence. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to make it worse." Camilla took a half step closer. "Then remember this next time," she said icily. "Princesses don't make scenes over natural inconveniences. They endure, privately." That was the moment the door behind her opened again, this time without warning. Catherine entered. She wasn't running, she wasn't panicked, she just walked. But the look on her face told everyone in the room that she had heard enough. Her eyes locked instantly on Charlotte. The child was sitting upright but shaking, shoulders hunched, head ducked. Catherine crossed the room in 3 swift steps and knelt, arms wrapping Charlotte close, protectively, maternally, without concern for formalities. She whispered nothing. She just held her, tightly. Charlotte buried her face against her mother's shoulder and finally sobbed. For real. Catherine's own voice cracked as she held her daughter tighter. You didn't ruin anything, she whispered. You're not broken. You're just growing. Tears hit Catherine's own cheeks, but Camilla didn't retreat. I see you've come, she said sharply, though rather late. Catherine didn't rise. Where were you while your daughter bled through a school appearance? Camilla added. Dr. Hawthorne stiffened. That is not how it happened. But Camilla pressed on. Perhaps if you taught your daughter how to carry herself, we wouldn't be having this humiliation today. Charlotte flinched again. Catherine looked up, still kneeling, eyes locked now with Camilla's, and through the tear-stained lashes and the grief came something colder, something steel-like. You think discipline is what she lacked? Catherine asked softly. She held it in for hours. She smiled when she was in pain. She apologized for bleeding. And she never asked for help, because somewhere along the line she was made to believe that asking was weakness. Camilla opened her mouth, but nothing came out. You didn't teach her strength, Catherine added. You taught her shame. Then she held Charlotte tighter, as if to physically block the words from touching her again. From the doorway, Guard Pierce hadn't moved, but his jaw had tightened. He saw it all, the way Camilla's expression faltered, the way Charlotte still held herself as if apology was a posture, the way Catherine finally let herself cry in front of her daughter, not from weakness, but from fury and guilt. The emotional wall had cracked, and inside the fissure was not chaos but clarity. Charlotte hadn't embarrassed the monarchy had embarrassed itself. The corridors of Windsor were old, but they knew how to carry sound. And the echoes of raised voices, no matter how controlled, had a way of travelling. Prince William didn't need a staff member to tell him something was wrong. He'd heard Catherine's voice. Not the soft, measured tone she reserved for press appearances, but the one few ever heard, the one she used when she was breaking. By the time William reached the children's wing, his pace was steady, but his eyes had sharpened, jaw clenched, no entourage behind him. He walked alone. Pierce stepped back instinctively as William passed him at the doorway. Inside, the atmosphere was frozen. Charlotte sat curled against Catherine, who still knelt on the floor beside the bench. Camilla stood a few feet away, arms folded, eyes narrowed, as if she'd just delivered a verdict. Everyone in the room looked at William the moment he entered, but he only looked at one person, Catherine, and in her eyes, rimmed red, tear-streaked, wide with helplessness, he saw everything. No words were exchanged, not yet, just comprehension. Camilla tried to recover first. Well, she said, voice sharp with false control. Someone had to say it. You and your wife are raising a generation of oversensitive. William didn't raise his voice. He didn't move quickly. He didn't need to. His voice sliced the room like an unspoken command. Guard Pierce. Pierce stepped in. William didn't look at him. Escort Her Majesty out. The words were clear, flat. Camilla froze. Excuse me. William finally turned toward her, and this time the quiet fire in his eyes burned through every layer of hierarchy. You've said enough. You've done enough. Please leave. I'm the Queen Consort, she snapped. You do not speak to my daughter like that, William interrupted. There was no escalation in his tone, just finality. You do not humiliate children for bleeding. You do not tell them they've embarrassed the family. And you do not punish girls for the audacity of growing up. Camilla's face paled slightly. She glanced around the room, as if looking for backup, but found only stillness. Catherine had not moved. Charlotte had stopped crying, but she clung tightly to her mother's blouse, eyes wide. William stepped forward once, not threateningly, but with weight. You interfered in something you didn't understand. You acted without empathy, and you have no authority here. Camilla's voice dropped. You think you can command me like a child? William didn't blink. What, you just treated a child worse than any commanding officer ever would? A long silence. Pierce waited, silent but ready. Camilla stared at William, and for the first time the weight of her position felt less certain. You're making a mistake, she said coldly. William's reply came like iron. No, I'm correcting one. He turned slightly. Pierce? The guard stepped forward, not forcefully, but with enough presence to make it clear the moment was over. Camilla scoffed. "I'll be reporting this to—" "You already did," William said. "To me." That silenced her for good. She looked back once more, perhaps hoping for some reversal. But no one moved. She left, not escorted by force, but shadowed by duty. The door shut quietly behind her. Only then did William exhale. He turned to Catherine and Charlotte, knelt down beside them. Charlotte didn't speak, but she leaned toward him. William looked at his wife, whispered, "She's safe now." Catherine nodded faintly, but her hand never left Charlotte's back. William looked to Pierce next. "Thank you." The guard simply inclined his head. "Just doing my duty, sir." William stood, glanced once around the room, then toward the nurse. "I want a full report on this incident." "Yes, Your Highness?" Every adult who had eyes on her today. Staff, teachers, drivers, everyone. "Yes, sir." He looked at his daughter one last time, and his voice gentled. "No one will speak to you that way again." Charlotte nodded slowly, but something else passed between father and daughter. The unspoken understanding that protection wasn't just physical. Sometimes the most powerful defense came after the damage, when someone saw the hurt, named it, and refused to let it happen again. Within 48 hours, a discreet internal review was underway. It wasn't dramatic, not the kind that triggered media leaks or royal press statements. But beneath the surface, the palace had activated one of its oldest mechanisms: institutional self-correction. William didn't speak much after escorting Camilla out. He didn't need to. His silence had weight, and everyone who passed him in the corridor that evening, from private secretaries to kitchen staff, understood that something had shifted. There would be questions, there would be consequences, and not all of them would be public. The review began the next morning. Staff were called in, not for interrogations, but interviews. Quiet, professional, swift. Pierce was the first to give his statement. He recounted Charlotte's unusual behaviour upon return from school, her hesitation in sitting down, her tightly held blazer, the visible discomfort she tried to mask with small smiles. "I noticed something was wrong," he said, "but not enough to act on without crossing protocol." The head of Royal Household Operations nodded solemnly. "What tipped the balance?" "The blood," Pierce said, "and her blazer. When I saw the inside was soaked, I knew it wasn't an external injury." "And what did she say?" "She begged me not to tell her mother." The words echoed, because in this palace, privacy was sacred, but so was child protection. Medical staff were next. They confirmed no physical injury, onset of early menstruation. Severe emotional distress due to misunderstanding of the event. Wire attempt to conceal due to social embarrassment and fear of consequence. She was terrified, one of the palace nurses said, not of the pain, but of having done something wrong. The doctor added, "What concerns us is that she went the entire school day, hours of contact with adults, without anyone noticing or intervening." The school's liaison was summoned. Her face was pale even before she sat. "I'm horrified," she said immediately. "We failed her." The review committee asked how staff could have missed the signs. "I think it was a combination of things," she said. "She's extremely polite, doesn't complain. When she asked to use the bathroom again, it was seen as habit. No one realized it was concealment." "Did any other children notice?" "Yes, and we believe they made comments. Nothing aggressive, but mocking." William, who sat silently at the edge of the room, finally spoke. "She bled through her uniform in public, and no one thought to stop and ask why." The liaison couldn't answer. Silence did instead. Back inside the palace, more findings emerged. The nanny assigned to accompany Charlotte misinterpreted her symptoms as stomach discomfort, offered water, and assumed it was nerves. The driver noticed she sat differently in the car, but didn't think it his place to ask. Palace staff welcomed her back routinely, never suspecting distress. The media team prepped her next scheduled engagement without checking on her comfort. In total, over a dozen adults interacted with Charlotte between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. Not one intervened, not out of malice, out of routine. And that, William made clear, was precisely the problem. We are not here to protect the image of this family, he said in the follow-up meeting. We're here to protect its people. His voice wasn't raised, but it didn't have to be. Every protocol officer in the room wrote down his words. Later that evening, Catherine joined the final debrief. She listened to the timeline, to the cold, sequential rendering of her daughter's distress. Every missed cue, every adult who didn't ask a question. Every moment, Charlotte was left to bleed silently, afraid, ashamed, and utterly alone. Catherine didn't cry again. She didn't need to. She simply said, no one should have to ask for help that many times and still go unheard. The meeting adjourned with quiet urgency. An institutional realization had settled in. There was no need for scandal, no press release. But the palace had failed a child, and now it would ensure it never happened again. The reforms didn't begin with an announcement. They began with a memo, typed, unsigned, circulated through inner administrative channels of the palace. It didn't name names, didn't assign blame, didn't reference scandal. It simply began with a sentence. We are all here because we missed a child's quiet call for help. From that point on, everything shifted. The first reform was subtle but significant. Every royal child, regardless of seniority, would now undergo a silent welfare check at the end of each public facing. No questions asked, no stigma, just a check. Even if they said everything was fine, especially if they said. The second protocol change addressed the start line. Nannies, aides, tutors. Every person with daily access to royal children would be retrained, not for etiquette, for recognition. They would be taught how children show discomfort without words, what medical signals are often missed, how emotional suppression is often learned, not innate, that a royal title doesn't make a child less vulnerable. The palace partnered quietly with pediatric mental health specialists to redesign internal guidelines. No one outside the walls would ever know. But inside, there would never again be an afternoon where a child was left to bleed through her clothing and beg for silence. Guard Pierce was summoned privately one morning. He entered the Red Study, where the king used to sign state papers, and found William already standing at the window. I won't keep you long, William said. You did something right. That's all this meeting is for. Pierce didn't respond. William turned. You saw something that didn't look wrong, and still acted. Most people only move when it's already too late. Pierce said nothing, because the job was never about thanks. Still, William extended a white envelope. Inside, a formal letter of commendation, handwritten by the private secretary and signed at the bottom. W. Pierce accepted it with a silent nod. He would never show anyone, but he would keep it. Because the job wasn't about praise, but dignity, and Charlotte's dignity had been preserved. In another room, Catherine sat in a quiet meeting with a new team of advisors, specialists focused on the well-being of royal children. I don't want new policy, she said softly. I want new instinct. They nodded. One of the women leaned forward. That begins with modelling. If the children see adults respond to pain calmly and without shame, they'll learn to do the same. Catherine nodded slowly. Then let's start with that. From that day, Catherine made one subtle change to her own calendar. She now walked with her children after each event. Not a nanny, not an aide, just her. So she could see their posture, their energy, their silences, even if she didn't say a word. Camilla did not receive any formal reprimand. There was no punishment, no official record, but within the palace, a message had been delivered. She would no longer be given unfiltered access to the children's wing. Her presence would now be escorted, observed, not obstructed, but never unsupervised. It wasn't personal, it was institutional, because once a line is crossed, even by a queen, trust doesn't vanish. But it does transform. As the days passed, the event was never mentioned again aloud. Charlotte was not told about the reviews. She was not shown any documents, was not given any updates, because she didn't need to carry that weight. The adults would carry it instead. And quietly silently, they did. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't grand. Charlotte simply asked if she could go outside. The spring light had returned to the palace lawn, and her shoes tapped lightly, as she walked along the stone edge near the rose bed, arms swinging just a little wider than usual, like she was testing her own space again. Pierce watched from a discreet distance, not stationed, not assigned, just present. She saw him eventually and wandered over, hands in her cardigan pockets, face neutral but open. There was no curtsy, no forced formalities, just a small voice. "Thank you, Vin, for not saying anything," she said. Pierce tilted his head. "You mean when I found you?" Charlotte nodded. "I thought you'd laugh, or get someone to yell, or ask lots of things I didn't know how to answer." Pierce's reply was quiet but certain. "Nothing about you needed laughing at." Charlotte blinked, then whispered, "That's what Mummy said." "Your mother's very wise," he said. She smiled faintly, then added almost absently, "I was so scared, it felt like everything was ruined." "It wasn't," Pierce said. "You weren't." Charlotte looked up. "Even if I bled in front of people?" "Even then." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, without quite planning to, she asked, "Will I bleed again?" Pierce paused. "Yes, but it'll be different. You'll know it's coming. It won't scare you the same way. And you'll never be alone for it again." Charlotte's shoulders dropped just slightly. The tension softened. "I don't want to grow up too fast," she said. "You don't have to," Pierce answered. "You just have to grow up safe." The wind passed gently between them, brushing Charlotte's hair across her cheek, and for the first time in days, she didn't reach to fix it immediately. From a few paces back, Catherine watched the exchange unfold. No one else had managed to pull Charlotte back into herself so gently. Not even her. Later that evening, Catherine would knock on the guard's private quarters, a rare breach of protocol. Pierce answered with a simple, "Ma'am, I just wanted to say thank you. You did everything right." He didn't nod, didn't step forward, just stood quietly. But Catherine pressed on. "You didn't ask for credit, or you didn't involve anyone you didn't have to. You made a space where my daughter could feel unashamed of her own body. Do you know how rare that is?" Pierce replied simply, "She needed space, not an audience." Catherine looked away for a beat, eyes catching the light, then quietly added, "Sometimes danger doesn't wear a face or raise a hand. Sometimes it's just silence and pressure, and adults forgetting that children feel everything, even when they don't speak." Pierce didn't answer. Because she was right. Some lessons aren't taught through rules. They're absorbed through quiet, witnessed care. That night, Charlotte slept through the night without waking. No trembling, no whispering, no questions. And when she joined the breakfast table in the morning, she wore a pale yellow dress. No cardigan, no extra blazer, no hidden coverage. And when William asked how she was, she didn't say, "Fine." She said, "I feel like me again." And everyone understood exactly what that meant. Catherine found herself walking the same corridor again, not because she meant to, not because of a schedule, but because her feet had chosen it, the long quiet stretch of carpet where everything had started just 2 days ago. The sun had shifted since then, so had her daughter, and so had she. The corridor was empty now. Staff had long since moved to evening duties. Security rounds were quiet, doors were closed. Voices hushed. Only one man remained at post. Sergeant Rowan Pierce stood in his usual quiet stillness near the eastern alcove. Not statuesque, but present, like someone who understood that even stillness could protect. Catherine paused a few steps from him. "Sergeant," she said softly. He turned. "Your Royal Highness." She looked at him for a long moment, then said, "I used to think that the worst danger to a child came from outside the walls." Pierce said nothing. He let the space hold her words. But sometimes it's the silence inside them, the pressure, the fear of not being perfect, the shame they never earned. Her voice didn't break, but her eyes flickered, just once. "Charlotte hid everything because she thought I needed her to." "She didn't want to cause disruption," Pierce said. "No child should have to think like that." Catherine took a breath, then stepped closer. "You did more than help her. You made sure her first moment of fear didn't become a memory of humiliation. And you did it without shouting, without overstepping, without making her feel small." Pierce simply responded, She needed someone to stand still. So I did. Catherine nodded. Then, gently, without fanfare, placed a folded white card in his hand. "For your record," she said, "it's from Charlotte." He accepted it, but didn't open it. That wasn't the moment. Catherine stepped back, and as she turned to leave, she paused at the end of the corridor and glanced back. "You were right," she said. "Sometimes standing still is the bravest thing we can do." Pierce said nothing. He didn't need to. As she disappeared around the corner, his fingers closed over the card, and in the silence that followed, he resumed his post. Still, steady, ready. Not because anyone asked him to, but because sometimes that's how palaces are truly protected. If you saw a child quietly hiding something painful, would you step in or would you wait for them to ask for help? Let us know in the comments. And while you're here, tap like, hit subscribe, and don't forget the bell icon so you never miss a story. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And watch one of the other stories on your screen right now. We'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place, with a brand new video.